Imagine a world at the dawn of the 1990s, when Japanese car makers were establishing themselves as titans of reliability and value, but not as manufacturers of world-shaking supercars. German and Italian brands, Porsche, Ferrari, Lamborghini, were the global benchmark, and the very idea that a Japanese car might dethrone them was, frankly, laughable to many enthusiasts and journalists. But then, in 1990, Honda pulled back the curtain on a machine that would change the game forever. The NSX wasn't just a Japanese sports car, it was a sports car engineered to challenge, and in many eyes surpass, the very best from Europe, especially Porsche. Born from the mind of an automaker obsessed with both motorsports and innovation, the NSX started not as a marketing exercise, but as an engineering passion project. Its roots go back to 1984 and the HP Honda Pininfarina Experimental, a concept car designed for no other reason than to see how good Honda engineers could be. After years of refining, the NSX, new sports car experimental, would become the NSX, a symbol of boundary-breaking Japanese ingenuity. What set the NSX apart from the Porsche 911 wasn't brute force or outrageous lap times, though in some cases it could outrun its German rival, but the way it delivered its performance. The secret in large part was its chassis. The NSX was the first production car in the world with a full aluminum monocoque chassis. This was revolutionary. It made the car lighter, sharper, and more communicative than anything before. Weight was the enemy, and the NSX felt like it wielded Excalibur. A big part of the NSX legend is one name: Ayrton Senna. Honda enlisted the help of this F1 legend, then at the very peak of his prowess, to help tune the chassis. It wasn't about lap records, but about feel. Senna pushed the development teams to stiffen the chassis, to make it tighter and more responsive. His fingerprints are everywhere, from the pedal weighting to the seat placement, to the way the car dances through corners. To drive an NSX is to be a little closer to racing royalty. Comparisons with the Porsche 911, then as now, were inevitable. Performance figures were closely matched, both cars boasting around 270 horsepower, similar 0 to 60 times, and top speeds. On track, the NSX would edge the 911 at technical courses like Tsukuba and the Nürburgring. 107.17 at Tsukuba for the NSX versus 1 minute 8.46 for the Porsche, and 8:16 on the Nordschleife versus 8:28 for the Carrera. Quarter-mile times were neck and neck, but where the Porsche always required a degree of respect, even fear, if you pushed to its limits, the NSX was approachable yet endlessly rewarding every day of the week. Magazine writers noted that the NSX drove like a friendly exotic. The steering was light and full of feel. The gearbox was crisp. There was a sense that the car wanted you to be your best, unlike many of its European rivals, which could be demanding and punishing. The NSX was engineered for both the back road and the daily grind. It didn't ask you to compromise. Honda didn't want to make a car that dominated only the track. They wanted one you could live with, without a chiropractor on speed dial or an oil leak in your driveway. But what about the numbers? If you're in a stats mood, here's a quick rundown for the 1990 NSX, a 3.0-litre DOHC VTEC V6, making 270 horsepower at 7,300 RPM and 210 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 miles per hour in just under 5.2 seconds. Top speed, 168 miles per hour. All aluminum construction, a world first. Double wishbone suspension at all 4 corners for perfect handling, and a 5-speed manual transmission. Even its paint job, 23 steps, including a chromate aircraft-style base coat, was proof that this car was about the details. If you're a sports car enthusiast, you know the numbers only tell part of the story. The rest, the magic, comes from the way the car makes you feel. The NSX was light, agile, and reassuring in a way few cars have ever been. It was a car that made everyone a better driver, not just the professionals. If you drove one in the 1990s, you didn't just arrive, you arrived in something that told the world you cared about technology, innovation, and real driving. In a head-to-head with the Porsche 911, the NSX didn't just match the German icon, it redefined what a supercar could be. Gordon Murray, the famed designer of the McLaren F1, used the NSX as his benchmark for usability, and that's telling. Here was a car that not only thrilled professional drivers, but did so with Japanese reliability, sensibility, and care for the owner. Unlike the sometimes high-strung, fragile Porsches and Ferraris of the age, an NSX would start each morning, idle smoothly, and make it to the office without complaint. Try that in an old 911 Turbo on a cold January morning. Let's talk about innovation for a moment, because the NSX wasn't just a leap forward for Honda, but for the automotive world. The aluminum body was more than just a technical showpiece. It was lighter and stiffer than steel, an industry first. The car also pioneered the use of titanium internals in its engine, forged pistons, and ultra-high revving capability, over 8,000 RPM race car territory. The NSX wore its F1 DNA on its sleeve, but never at the expense of comfort or durability. It had climate control, a fantastic sound system, and space for luggage. Honda built the NSX in a purpose-made facility in Tochigi, staffed by engineers and craftsmen hand-picked for their experience and skill. Each NSX was essentially hand-built, with every detail meticulously inspected and tested. The result was a car that felt as tight and fresh after years of driving as it did on the showroom floor. There's a myth that the NSX was a failure because it didn't sell in Ferrari or Porsche numbers. In reality, Honda sold more than 18,000 units worldwide by the time production wrapped up in 2005. That's a huge number for a true halo vehicle. Its influence far exceeded its production numbers. The NSX forced Porsche to rethink ergonomics and reliability. Ferrari learned it wasn't enough to build the fastest car. You had to make it drivable too. Whenever you read a review that praises the everyday usability of a modern supercar, thank the NSX. If the latest 911 or Audi R8 doesn't try to maim you on your morning commute, thank the NSX. If Gordon Murray set his McLaren F1 to daily driver standards, thank the NSX. It's a car whose legacy is measured not just in lap records, but in the way it changed how the world thought supercars could and should behave. There's another aspect worth considering: price. When launched, the NSX cost around $55,000 in the US, hardly cheap, but a bargain compared to its rivals from Europe. It offered comparable performance, peerless reliability, and even reasonable economy, up to 28 miles per gallon with steady driving. It was a supercar for people who didn't want to mortgage their homes to pay for maintenance. It didn't just democratize performance, it made the supercar something you could aspire to own, not just dream about. The NSX also had a racing pedigree that was more than just for show. While it didn't decimate the likes of Porsche in professional motorsport outright, it set a new engineering standard and regularly challenged, and sometimes beat, more established names at everything from lap times to driver satisfaction. In Japan, it became a symbol of the country's technological might. On the street, it was the underdog that could run with the best of Europe and leave its owners grinning. Over the years, the NSX evolved. The engine grew from 3.0 litres to 3.2 litres. Power rose to 290 horsepower, and new variants like the NSX Type R, a stripped-out, even sharper version, proved that Honda hadn't forgotten the hardcore enthusiasts. Production remained low volume and meticulously crafted. Later models lost the iconic pop-up headlights, but never lost that magic blend of performance and accessibility. The car drew fans from F1 drivers to everyday car geeks, a rare cross-section of automotive passion. Today, the 1990 Honda NSX is worshipped as one of the most influential cars ever built. Betting against it wasn't just foolish, it was missing the bigger picture. This was the car that showed the world a Japanese manufacturer could beat Porsche at their own game, without ever needing to actually race against them wheel to wheel. The victory came on the roads and in the hearts of drivers everywhere. So when you see someone slip behind the wheel of an early NSX, you're watching them pilot a piece of living history, a sports car that dared to challenge Europe's proudest names and, in doing so, redefined what we expect from the term supercar. It's proof that brilliance comes from passion, innovation, and the courage to dream bigger than anyone thought possible. That's the real story of the 1990 Honda NSX, the Japanese sports car that humbled Porsche without ever needing to race it. Even 30-plus years later, the NSX's styling continues to turn heads in a way that feels strangely timeless. While many supercars of its era were busy piling on scoops, wings, and sharp edges, the NSX achieved something harder: understated beauty. Clean, aerodynamic lines wrapped a mid-engine chassis with proportions that whispered exotic without shouting. The wedge-shaped nose, the slim pop-up headlights, the raked windshield flowing into a graceful roofline, everything felt cohesive, purposeful, and light. It was the kind of design you could park next to a Ferrari 348 or a Porsche 964 and immediately sense that Honda had studied its European competition closely, then forged its own identity rather than copying them. Aerodynamics played a quiet yet vital role. The sleek bodywork wasn't just for looks, it was shaped by extensive wind tunnel testing at facilities Honda had previously used for its F1 cars. Engineers obsessed over cutting drag while maintaining stability at high speeds. Even the flush-mounted door handles and concealed headlamps were about improving airflow. The windshield rake, at 21 degrees, was incredibly sharp for a production car at the time, and drew direct inspiration from F-16 fighter jets. Sitting inside and looking forward, the canopy-like visibility felt exactly as Honda intended. It made you feel like a pilot. Inside, the NSX shattered expectations of what a supercar interior could be, whereas Porsches of the time still carried a somewhat upright, functional, almost cramped cockpit, and Ferraris demanded that you contort yourself into an Italian leather daydream. The NSX felt refreshingly ergonomic. From the driver's seat, every control fell naturally to hand. Visibility was near panoramic, an intentional choice from Honda, which studied fighter jet cockpits to perfect the sense of spatial awareness. The thin A-pillars, made possible by the rigid aluminum structure, meant that corners could be spotted earlier and judged more precisely. This was no claustrophobic cave where you sacrificed comfort for speed. This was a supercar that invited you in. Honda also approached the driving position with scientific precision. The pedal placement, the thickness of the steering wheel rim, the alignment of the seat with the gear lever, nothing was left to chance. Honda's engineers famously measured ankle, knee, and hip angles for optimal driver control and reduced fatigue. The end result was a seating posture that made the NSX instantly comfortable, even if you drove it for hours. This was revolutionary thinking for a market segment that often treated comfort as a dirty word. As for that now legendary engine, it was a jewel of naturally aspirated engineering. The C30A 3.0-litre DOHC-V6 featured Honda's groundbreaking VTEC, variable valve timing, and lift electronic control system technology, more often associated with their high-revving Civic and Integra Type R engines. In the NSX, VTEC delivered a Jekyll and Hyde personality, smooth, tractable power in normal driving, and an intoxicating cam changeover rush as you passed 5,800 RPM. It wasn't about brute torque. It was about the spine-tingling precision of an engine that loved to spin. Titanium connecting rods, an unusual and expensive choice, allowed the engine to rev past 8,000 RPM safely, something practically unheard of outside of race machinery in that era. Honda also treated the manual gearbox like a sacred component. The short-throw shifter was rifle-bolt precise, light yet positive, making every change tactile and rewarding. If many Italian gearboxes felt like a challenge you had to master, the NSXs reminded you that driving should be a joy, not a chore. Again, this was Honda using its racing DNA to refine, not intimidate, the driver experience. When the NSX first hit showrooms, the media reaction was nothing short of astonishment. Road and Track described it as Ferrari performance without the flaws, while Car and Driver raved about the way everything works, and works well. Professional racing drivers who tested the car found themselves surprised at how approachable its limits were. Sure, you could take it to a track day and hang with the best of Europe, but you could just as effortlessly commute to work in it. That dual personality was something Porsche and Ferrari had not yet perfected at the time. This approachability was not an accident. It was the product of thousands of hours of tuning, including significant input from Ayrton Senna. His feedback from rainy Suzuka test sessions pushed Honda to stiffen the chassis by 50%, ensuring the car remained poised even at the edge of grip. Senna understood something that many road car engineers didn't. A truly great performance machine is as much about its ability to communicate with the driver as it is about how fast it goes. The NSX became a masterclass in communication, its steering rack, suspension geometry, and chassis rigidity all combining to speak clearly to the driver through seat, wheel, and pedals. The victory without racing against Porsche wasn't achieved in a single moment, but rather as a creeping revelation across the automotive press and enthusiast community. Comparisons kept showing the NSX matching or beating the Porsche 911 in key performance areas: acceleration, braking, agility, while decisively winning on ergonomics and reliability. For buyers who wanted exotic looks and performance without the fear of catastrophic maintenance bills, the NSX was a revelation. Porsche took notice. Subtly but surely, the next generations of the 911 began to incorporate some of the usability lessons the NSX had laid bare. Better seating positions, improved visibility, easier day-to-day drivability. It's no stretch to say Honda's challenge pushed Porsche toward a more well-rounded sports car philosophy. Of course, such innovation came with challenges. Building an aluminum monocoque was not easy in 1989, especially for a company producing on a much smaller scale than their mass-market Civics and Accords. Honda had to invent entirely new assembly techniques and train a specialized workforce. At Tochigi, NSX production resembled more of an aerospace process than a traditional automotive one. This wasn't about churning out cars, it was about carefully crafting them. Weld seams were invisible, panels aligned to millimeter tolerances, paint quality near flawless. Buyers noticed, even after years of use, many NSXs aged gracefully, with minimal rattles, squeaks, or cosmetic flaws, a rare claim for a 1990s exotic. Over its long production run, the NSX amassed a devoted cult following. Anecdotes poured in from owners who'd kept their cars for decades without serious repairs, from those who'd taken them on spirited cross-country road trips without a hiccup. Unlike some European competitors, which might spend as much time at a specialist shop as on the road, the NSX simply worked. Collectors today recognize the NSX not just for its innovations, but for its place in reshaping perceptions of Japanese performance. Before the NSX, most car enthusiasts would never have dared mention a Japanese-built car in the same breath as Ferrari or Porsche, unless they were talking about reliability. After the NSX, that conversation was changed forever. It wasn't just the halo effect for Honda, it was validation for an entire nation's ability to compete at the absolute highest level of automotive engineering. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you liked this video. Stay safe, stay curious, and above all, stay human.